Attorney James Trusty, one of the members of former President Trump's legal team, with us now. Mr. Trusty, good morning to you.
Morning.
Mr. Trusty, just first of all, what was the president's response to the charges? And when did you first learn that this grand jury in Florida was being used?
Yeah, well, on that last part, fairly recently, and it's a really intriguing kind of shift of events. I mean, there's been endless grand jury dragging people up from Florida to Washington, D.C. for many months. You know, everyone from the vice president of the United States to groundskeepers to maids to Secret Service agents to lawyers that supposedly hold privileges. So there's been a real bum rush in D.C. in terms of using an awful lot of grand jury and getting a lot of rulings that are historic and perhaps very bad for the country. Recently, we started to hear about witnesses going down or staying down in Florida to appear in front of the grand jury. And it could be a reflection of an acknowledgement by DOJ they had some venue problems, that they really never should have venued it in D.C., but they were very happy to get the kind of rulings and home cooking they got. Or it could be something where they want to sanitize, I guess kind of related to that, sanitize all of the proceedings from D.C. and kind of repackage, remarket it for consumption down in South Florida. So we'll see. As to the president, look, he's a resilient guy. You know, this just in. You know, he's a pretty tough guy. It's a difficult conversation when you're talking to a client who's actually factually innocent of these charges. I mean, and it's a long story we can get into there about the Presidential Records Act. But, you know, so that part, you know, he was upset for the country. But in terms of him, he's a fighter, and he's going to come out swinging, and he'll be fine. But, I mean, that was really, to me, kind of the interesting inside part of that is to see him almost immediately start talking about what it means for this country and our criminal justice system and not just about himself.
Is he going to appear on Tuesday? And Jim, do you think he'll also face charges in D.C. as well?
He will appear in court on Tuesday, no doubt. You know, he's not afraid of this thing. It's a ridiculous criminalization of a non-criminal dispute. So he'll be there, you know, and and so will Secret Service, and we'll coordinate with U.S. Marshals and make sure that it is as efficient and safe as we can make the whole situation. As to any other charges, I don't think so. I mean, look, we think this whole investigation is an overreach. Again, something that was never criminal for any other president in history has suddenly been weaponized by this Department of Justice. It would be, you know, another bridge too far for them to try to break up charges for some reason to kind of hedge their bets and charge him in Washington, D.C. as well. So we think that this is it. We'll see the indictment sometime between now and Tuesday afternoon, and we think that's the only indictment that we're facing.
You're his lawyer, so obviously you're going to maintain his innocence. But, Jim, I think a lot of folks have a hard time understanding how the president can maintain he did nothing wrong when the fact of the matter is that the president had documents at his home that were classified. As we understand it, there was a subpoena issued to turn over those documents. In August of last year, the lawyer maintains that all the documents were overturned. The FBI then shows up at Mar-a-Lago and finds roughly 100 classified documents. How can the president maintain he did nothing wrong?
Yeah, well, the starting point is up until the Presidential Records Act, any former president could possess anything they want. I mean, that was just kind of the nature of the business. We've entrusted them under the Constitution with the nation's secrets. So if they want to keep stuff, they can keep it. The PRA, the Presidential Records Act, kicked in because of Richard Nixon. And what it anticipates is nothing criminal. There's no criminal statute within the Presidential Records Act that says it's a violation to possess any of these things, even the most sensitive documents. What they say is the world is presidential or personal, and the president, of all people, the former president, makes the call. If the archivist disagrees, it doesn't turn into a criminal case. They can sue civilly in Washington, D.C. So the whole system anticipates that we've entrusted our former presidents with the nation's secrets, documentary or otherwise. Yeah. And if there is any sort of fight, it gets resolved civilly, not with raids, not with a leak campaign, Jim, not with what we've seen in this case.
Jim, I know you spent a number of years at the Justice Department. You know the special counsel, Jack Smith, pretty well. Even if your client did nothing wrong, why not tell your client to at least knock off the personal attacks on the special counsel?
Look, you know, this guy has lived through 7 years of misplaced aggression, of ridiculous impeachments, of accusations, of, you know, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels lawsuits or criminal cases being revived by politicized prosecutors. You know, you can't, when you look at what we've seen in terms of the conduct of this investigation. He has every right to be offended, as should all of us. I mean, it's just broken in the last couple of days. We've known about it for a while, that one of the deputies for Jack Smith extorted an attorney to try to get him to flip his witness.
Jim, to be clear, and I've heard you make this claim before, we don't have any independent evidence, and so far you haven't produced any independent evidence to back that up. But to your point there, twice impeached, now twice indicted. The president plans to campaign this weekend to those who would say that we like the former president. We like some of his policies, but now the guy has too much baggage. What would you say to those Republican primary voters?
Look, I'm not in the political lane, I'm in the legal lane. But to go back to your kind of dismissal of what I just said, there is a statement by an officer of the court, a very well-respected attorney, submitted to a federal judge detailing exactly what I just said, the extortion, the violation of the obstruction statute by those who are trying to pin an obstruction charge on President Trump. That is a momentous moment, and nothing I've ever seen in the Department of Justice in my history, and it will play out. This is not just lawyer talk. This is the real thing. You're talking about a sealed letter to a judge there. Jim Trusty. Jim, thank you. Thanks for your time, sir. All right. Thank you.
All right. Let us bring in NBC senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett and our chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker. Laura, if you're listening to Trump's attorney, it seemed like they were sort of surprised by the fact that this indictment came down. What do you make of that?
It's interesting. They almost were in the position as all of us this time last week, not even knowing about the Florida grand jury, and seemed to only fairly recently, he said, been informed by it, even though Jack Smith apparently had been quietly working away on this for the better part of a month. And witnesses were going in there unbeknownst to us. But, he's making this point about retaining classified documents as if everybody does it. Everybody does not keep the documents after they've been asked to return them repeatedly. That's what makes this willful under the statute. And that's why this has escalated into a criminal case. It's very different than finding some documents by accident and then immediately turning them over. That is not this case.
So just to be clear, so for a year, Trump has had these documents. He was asked repeatedly to return them. So in these charges, which we don't know what they are because they're sealed, it has something to do with the retention of them, right?
It has to do with the retention of them having no authority to keep them. He's no longer president, and he's keeping them in an unclassified setting.
All right. So, Kristen, let me talk to you for a second. So you wonder, is this going to help Trump or hurt Trump? Well, moments after the indictment came down, he was fundraising on it. So it seems like former President Trump thinks this is going to be something that's going to help him out.
You're right, Hoda. In the short term, there's no doubt this is emboldening him yet again. We saw this in the wake of the New York indictment as well. You have a number of his Republican rivals rushing to criticize the process, accusing DOJ of being weaponized by the Biden administration. But I do think there are a couple of differences here. One, you do have some challengers who are criticizing him. Asa Hutchinson saying that he has too much legal baggage. And you also have the potential fatigue factor. Here again, he's asking people to give him money. Will you start to see some of his challengers make the case that his campaign is about defending him instead of the American people? I'm told, based on my conversations with sources, that you might start to see some Republican candidates make that case.
Okay. And Laura, if by chance he is convicted on this, people wonder, like, what's the end game? So what could happen?
Yeah, I mean, we have to see exactly what he's being charged with, but an obstruction of justice related charge, we're talking about 20 years in prison. This is not some low-level felony. This is very serious.
And just let's play this out for 1 second. So if that happens, can a man still run for president if, in fact, that's the case?
There's never been a situation like this. This is extraordinary. This has never happened before. There's nothing that stops him from running for president while he is under federal indictment for classified information.
And top advisors to former President Trump say that he will only dig in with each indictment. But the question is, if there is a pileup, if there are more indictments, does that start to chip away at his support around the edges? We'll have to see.
All right, Kristen, Laura, thank you guys so much.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on our streaming channel, Today All Day. To watch, head to today.com/allday or click the link right here.